that is where we'll go on ahead and pick up this evening. All right, so let's start off in Psalm 55, verse 17. I have a volunteer who'd like to read that. If not, I can go on ahead and take it. Oh, Andrew?
During the evening, morning, and noon time, I will lament and moan, and he will hear me. He will rescue me and protect me from those that attack me, even though they greatly outnumber me.
All right. So when did the psalmist pray according to that verse that Andrew just read for us?
It says evening and morning and at noon.
So whole day pretty much, right?
Pretty much.
All right. That's kind of the same conclusion that I came to as well. I didn't really think of any other times besides, evening, morning, and noon, at least throughout the daytime. So any other kind of thoughts on that? I thought it was kind of direct, at least that passage itself was. Let's go ahead and go to Psalm 119, all the way in verse 164 of Psalm 119. And somebody has that and would like to read. Oh, Angie?
7 times a day I praise you for your righteous rules.
All right. There's not 8 days in a week, so I guess we can only go up to 7 times a day. Sorry, I had the wrong thought there. All right. So 7 times a day. If I'm not mistaken, isn't 7 considered a complete number? All right. That's what I thought. So I have to wonder if in him using that number 7 that's what we're supposed to spend our day completely doing, or doing completely throughout the day. Yes, Zach?
Looking back, when I went through these, looking back at Psalm 55, when it said I pray in the morning, or day, noon, whatever it was like, okay, there's maybe been a few times, I prayed at breakfast, prayed at lunch, prayed at dinner, those things. Yeah. But when I read Psalm 119 in verse 164 here, it's like, I don't know if I can ever recall that I prayed 7 times in one day. And, I think usually we think that's a lot. Nobody needs to do that, right? But to me, this is just a side point. I just thought I'd bring up. Mm-hmm. To me, I'm like, well, what's the harm in praying 7 times? What's the harm in praying 10 times in one day? Yeah. And we're going to get to this next question. Why would the psalmist pray throughout the day? Was that kind of your next focus?
Yeah.
I'm going to answer that if that's okay.
Okay.
The reason for maybe 7 times a day, or however many times a day it may be, we all have those days that are just terrible, right? I know when I have those days, I lack in prayer. I really don't turn to God as much as I feel like I should. So I think a good focus for this is we're having an example of during days like those. That's just one example of that question. Mm-hmm. It's not a bad idea to reach out to God as many times as we need. And there's never a cap on that. So that's kind of just a few application points that I pulled from that little section.
Good thoughts. Ethan?
Yeah, I think about that too. And one of the examples that always comes to mind is Daniel. Mm-hmm. So I forget the number, but I think it said he prayed 100 times a day. And so then I start thinking, well, maybe my expectations are off because I'm thinking, I have to sit down and do this really drawn out, like an elongated thing. And that's probably not what Daniel was doing. It might be a sentence, and I do that sometimes, where it could just be a word.
Yeah.
Like help or thank you or whatever it is. And so I think that makes it a little bit more in the perspective of how attainable it actually is, where it's just communication and it's not just this ritualistic thing that we always have to do.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. Think about anytime you go to talk to a close friend, do you always have to have that same kind of, hey, I have to wait till I have a long story or something important to talk to them about. No, you automatically, it's something it just comes naturally. And so I think that's something that we oftentimes have to focus on, and I've had that same kind of viewpoint as well. Yes, Jim?
I couldn't hear what was said, but you talk about 7.
Mhm.
I was thinking, at the beginning, in the beginning, in 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth, and rested the seventh. And in all nations everywhere today, 7 days completes 1 week. And today, everybody that obeys 7 things will go to heaven. You got to hear, understand, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, be faithful to death, you'll go to heaven.
Yeah, it is kind of cool how oftentimes the number 7 correlates to so many different things throughout the Bible. Indeed. So, those are some excellent thoughts and views. Is there anything else that somebody had on whether on 164 or why they think the psalmists pray throughout the day? I wrote down, I thought that it was indeed to have that stronger and deeper relationship with God that we all strive to. Because I know I have those same kinds of thoughts too, that I oftentimes don't even think, or that it has to be something that I devote more time to when I go to talk to God, instead of it just being, I'm struggling, I don't know what to do here, can you just, I need your guidance. And we do oftentimes, I think, overthink and overcomplicate it, even though he is capable of, anything from the largest of tasks to the smallest. So, yes, Ethan.
How I think about it for myself is I need to keep this communication open so that I can maintain that spiritual connection.
Yeah.
So one thing I do sometimes, not even really intentionally, is, I won't want to say amen because then I feel like it stops.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I'll forgo that just to, it might sound cheesy, but continue the conversation because I realize I need that connection to keep my mind in the right space.
Yeah, no, that's valid. I feel like, it is kind of like, it does seem almost like a hard stop when you're just sort of like, well, I don't want to just end my communication with God. I always want to have him there and be a part of a lot of what we do. So excellent thoughts. Yes, Alicia.
That sentiment of not ending the conversation with God, it makes me think of, I call Liz all the time. And it makes me think of like when I call her and we're just like totally doing our own separate things, but we're on the phone keeping each other company. And like, there's a sense that God's just there keeping us company and he's there to hear, and whenever like we have a random thought that comes in, then we're like, oh, by the way, or you think of something new for the day, like that just makes me think of how I communicate with Liz, because we're best friends and we're super close, and like that's how we're supposed to be with God.
Yeah, no, that is an excellent viewpoint and definitely something we should strive for. I mean, to have that close of a relationship with God that you just want him to be there and be present on. I feel oftentimes, I know I've struggled in like feeling alone or something like that, and you're never truly alone. You always have that communication, that person that you go to. And so you having that connection with Liz is a good example of how we should try to have that connection with God. So, great thoughts. Anybody have anything else they wanted to add? All right, then let's go ahead and go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and that'll be verses 16 through 18. If I could get a volunteer that would like to read that. Jane?
Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you.
All right, thank you. I feel like it was, I think, was it last Wednesday? Or was it, I forget, in the previous lesson, this same passage came up, 1 Thessalonians 5, 16 through 18, and Chet is not here this evening, but he made a comment about how sometimes he's struggled with that. And I know we talked about that in a previous class, about how sometimes that can be a difficult thing to do, to pray without ceasing and be thankful for the good and the bad. And I know we had a good conversation about that then, and it's something that I've definitely been kind of thinking about more. And so I didn't know if anybody else had some new thoughts or Any feelings towards that, or things that they've been thinking about or striving to do? No, since Chet did make that comment about how he had previously lost, was it 2 wives, and how it was difficult for him to accept that, and how he would pray, and it was hard for him to accept the answer that God gave him. It's made me think, since he told me about that, how I try to analyze things and trying to be thankful for the good and the bad. And I'm like, how am I supposed to be thankful for things that are bad? It's not an easy task by any means, but it's made me realize that, okay, maybe there's something that God is trying to show me, or something that he's trying for me to learn through this situation. And so I've been striving to have that, okay, when something's going on, what lesson can I learn? Or am I actually stopping to think and say, hey, I should pray about this? So that's something that I've been trying to think about since we've had that conversation. Ethan, then Andrew?
I think about that too. We actually, I'm sure everybody remembers my sermon from Sunday, right? But we mentioned that a little bit in the morning, talking about all the different bad things that can happen to us. And part of the point that made in Romans 8 is Paul's talking about all the suffering that we experience, and he says that thing, everything works out for the good of those who love God. And that's basically, everything is working toward his eternal purpose. And so there might be something in a situation I'm supposed to learn. And a lot of times there is, but it could also be that it's just generally heading in that direction. Even the bad things are going to fit within his plan.
Yeah.
And part of this constant communication that this question is talking about is, okay, trying to work through how does this fit, and what am I supposed to get from this, and how does this teach me more about who God is?
Yeah.
And those kind of things.
Definitely. I will admit, I don't remember your sermon from Sunday, but I wasn't here. Andrew?
Well, what this is making me think of is just like looking for God in any situation, because God can fit in any situation. It reminds me of a few years back when me and John were doing a podcast together. We would pick sometimes almost a random current events topic, and it was kind of interesting how we would kind of chat about it for a little while, and then we'd start recording, and we would find some way to link it to some kind of lesson or some kind of reminder about spiritual things. I remember we did one about like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency once. It's like, how do you get to a conversation about God from that? But what these passages show, like the Psalm 55 one, he's praying to God morning, noon, and evening, and he's moaning. He's distressed, but he finds all of those situations. He finds, how can my mind turn to God in these situations? In Psalm 119, he prays 7 times a day because he loves God's justice, and he loves God's law, and he loves God, like the rules and the order that God has set up. So totally different emotion and attitude on the part of the one who's praying, but still, it's kind of this attitude of keeping your eyes open to, how can I find God in everything, good or bad? And then the Thessalonians passage is all about, the thankfulness. And how can you be thankful for everything that happens to you in the day? Anything that happens to you that you're glad about, can you pause and tie that back to God? And I think in every situation you can.
Yes, indeed. Have you ever met somebody that is just in a natural conversation able to do that? Just you could be talking about almost anything, and somehow their brain can just correlate it to something that they read either that day or that week, or they're just so involved in the scriptures that they can tie almost any point of a conversation back to scriptures. And that's something I've never been able to personally achieve, but talking to somebody and just meeting somebody like that they're just able to look at so many different things and just pull a biblical application from it is just so encouraging, and you have to wonder, if I tried to have that mindset, how much more could I think about God or focus on praying more or different things like that? So, good points.
And maybe a lesson for us as far as why do that. I think it helps us learn to think and see things a little more the way God sees them.
Definitely.
I won't claim that we can have the mind of God, but in thinking through everything, good or bad, how is God present in this situation? How is God acting in this situation? When we get ourselves trained in thinking that way, something might happen to us then, or someone that we know, and it may come more easily to us to see, just see a little more of how God might be viewing the situation rather than just viewing it from our perspective.
Yeah.
And that can really help us, and it can be a way that we can be an encouragement to someone else too.
Yes, definitely. Having the mindset of Christ is definitely something we should strive to think more like each and every day. Good point. Yes, Jim.
Yeah, that's what it says, everything, all things. We got to be careful with the words when they come through the scripture. A number of places, if you don't qualify it, you teach error. For instance, back in the beginning, back during Noah's day, God told Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. Obviously, you got to qualify that. There's 8 of them still living in the ark, you see. You come through like Romans 8:28. All things work together for good. You've got to qualify that. If you don't, you justify sin. You do evil, the good may come. You've got to qualify. Everything under heaven doesn't work for good for Christians. It does not. If we make it say that, we're teaching error.
Yeah, definitely.
Sin can't be in there. And if you qualify it, say sin not involved, then you qualify it, you see.
Yeah, so like you were saying, as the New Testament came into place and everything, how they got rid of all the old law and how now we can only be saved through Christ, and that's the only way that we can qualify. We definitely have to keep that in mind, and of course do everything according to the New Testament to be able to follow through to qualify, because definitely have to meet the expectations that God has set for us. So I agree. So did that kind of answer what you were saying, or?
You talking to me? Yeah, I didn't get the last thing you said, but what was you asking?
Oh, so we should always strive to make sure that we follow what God is, the expectations that God has set for us in everything that we do.
Yeah, when he says all things, like Romans 8:28, that means everything under heaven, or it doesn't mean. Which is it? It can't mean everything under heaven. If it did, it would include the works of the flesh, sodomy, all kind of lying and murder. You can't put that in there, because it's qualified to the context. It's got a number of things, so anything in the context work together for good. That's how you qualify it.
Everything that's good and righteous. That's correct. Yeah, definitely have to follow what is correct and disregard what is incorrect. Any other thoughts or comments? All right, then let's go on ahead and go down to question number 12. And the psalmist prayed in good times. And so we're going to look at Psalm chapter 9. Psalm chapter 9, read verses 2, and then it skips down to 4 and 5. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. And it drops down to verse 4 and 5. For you have maintained my just cause. You have sat on the throne judging righteously. You have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. You have blotted out their name forever and ever. I'll be honest. In this specific passage, I struggled to see when he was saying, when you prayed according to the following passages. And just in this particular question, I was lost in the point he was trying to make in this. So I didn't know if anybody else was kind of able to make heads and tails of where he was trying to say the psalmist prayed according to those passages. Ethan?
I agree. It wasn't super clear what he was talking about. I think what was going on, if you're looking at verses 1 and 2, and he's talking about thanking the Lord and declaring and rejoicing and singing about his name, he's taking as kind of the prayer part. And then in verses 4 and 5 that he's pointing us to, I think he's pointing us to the situation of, I'm in this good situation, and that's why I'm praying. I think that's kind of how he split it up.
Okay. Actually, I mean, I read that through those multiple times, and I just could not figure out exactly what where his view is coming from on that one. So.
Yeah, I had to read the whole psalm to get what he was saying.
Okay. I know if anybody else had some thoughts about how they could have saw it, or if everybody's just as confused as me on at least that first part of 12. I appreciate those thoughts, because I was myself was lost in that one. So let's go on ahead and drop down to Psalm 65, verses 1 through 4. There's a volunteer that would like to read that. Yale?
There will be silence before you and praise in Zion, O God. And to you the vow will be performed, O you who hear our prayer and hear prayers. To you all men come. Iniquities prevail against me, and as for transgression, you forgive them. How blessed is the one whom you chose and bring near to you to dwell in your courts. We will be satisfied with the goodness of your house, your holy temple.
All right.
There's not a page that you can turn to in the scriptures that you can't find something to bring about a spiritual thought. I think that's a good bit of what the psalmists themselves did all the time. They spent the majority of their days with something spiritual in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they wrote some these phrases that we're not familiar with, but we still know what they mean by them.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thought to be able to read through the Psalms and to see all the things that they thought of themselves, which we should have been thinking about before we ever read them. But it's a wonderful day when we can read them.
Yes, it is. There's so many, when you go to look at just the Psalms themselves, like you said, there's so many little concepts or little things that they tie in that you're able to think about in a spiritual way and make that connection, and it just helps you to think about more spiritual things throughout the day. What did anybody have anything about what they thought about when the psalmist prayed according to that passage? I think it refers back to something we've kind of mentioned before of when he prayed in times of trouble, and when iniquities were prevailing against me. It kind of made me think back on, I think we've called the term, at least I know I've called it before, panic praying, about when you're in trouble, that's where your kind of mind goes to. At least that's what I thought he was saying. Andrew?
It's a common theme in these of it's when you're seeing the benefits of being God's people, and when you're experiencing the blessing of belonging to God. Because it's not a prayer just of thankfulness for, thanks for the food that I've worked for, or thanks for you've blessed me with possessions, or you've blessed me with plenty. It's nothing that is self-aggrandizing at all, because it's all you delivered me from the enemies, or you forgave sins, and now I'm in a state where my sins are forgiven, so it's praising God for that. You've allowed me to live in your palaces. So it's praising God in good times, but it's at the same time a humble kind of prayer because it's saying, I'm just benefiting from everything you've done, God. Like, you have done all these things, and I'm reaping the benefits of it, and so I'm going to pray to you because this is all from you.
Yeah, I needed help, and you were there for me. It's some good thoughts. Appreciate those. Anybody else have anything they had for Psalm 65? The next one I thought was, it was a good kind of thought question. Why do some neglect prayer in good times? Zach.
Yeah, this is me. Unfortunately, it's been me because people like me, we get in good times and then we get caught up in the moment of how good things are. It's like, oh, I don't need anything else now. I've got what I've asked for. I'm content with the situation that's going on. What else do I need to do? And it's easy when all the good things start coming in, we focus more on that than the actual fact of how they came to be or the reason why we're in the position that we're in. So it's easy for us to kind of go away from that and focus more on the good than why the good is. And that, unfortunately, is the situation I'm in more than not.
I think it's something that's unfortunately very common that I know we all strive to change. I've fallen into that pattern myself at times, and it's just something that's I agree. I had a lot of the same kind of thoughts. I wrote I get complacent and I get forgetful, and I just sometimes fail to have the prayer life with God that I should. Alicia mentioned how she and Liz have that communication. How if you see them, Alicia was gone on vacation, they talk. And when they don't talk, they miss each other. They want to, they try to find time to, and that's the kind of relationship we should strive to have with God. Whether it's good times, or I think I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but I think does it end up talking about bad times as well? Yeah, that's the next section. But how we should just strive to continually have that open communication with God that we sometimes fail to. Yes, Jim.
Something that reminds us of, in order for God to hear our prayers and to answer them, he said we got to hear him first. That he that turneth away his ear from hearing the law, his prayer is abomination to God. We need to remember that in addition to all these good things.
Yes. Yeah, you definitely have to have both parts to it. Anybody else have any thoughts about why it's easy to forget to Andrew?
I think maybe we shut out some things that we could pray for because we think it's not significant enough. And if we remember that you can simplify it a lot and pray for simple things, and that's still worth God's time. It's still worth our time to do that. Remind ourselves of that. You don't have to wait for something really just extraordinary to happen to you before you are thankful for that good circumstance.
Indeed, we're truly blessed, and even if we just say, just thankful for some things that we might call simple, He's given us more than we could truly ever acknowledge. So, definitely. All right, then it jumps right into another kind of thought question. Why do some find it easier to pray in good times? Zach?
It's the other side of the personality chart. There's some people who are just very naturally appreciative in moments like this. Like, I can think of times where I've done something pretty small for Emily, and then it's like a couple of days later she'll be like, I'm still really thankful for what you did for me the other day or whatever. And that's how some people are. So when people do realize what God has done for them and they have that personality type of being so appreciative, it's like they want to remind God all the time that they are very thankful for what the position they're in. So I think that's a good example of people who do tend to go to that side of the equation.
Ethan?
I'm like Zach, where a lot of times when it's good, I forget. So this was a little
So it seems that our mindset and our thought process in it is very important and crucial as to how we think and how we're involved in our prayer life with God.
When things are good, we forget who made them good,
Yes, we oftentimes do.
or we neglect to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know I've struggled with the same things and need to work on that myself. So, good thoughts. Is there anything? Yes, Taylor.
I find this a little bit easier for me now, and I don't know if it's just because of getting older in my life a little bit and just different roles. But two examples I can think of is in my work, I'm kind of more of a mentor now, as I've been in the same department now for many years. I don't know if I got to a point where I realized that my mind and my knowledge and everything I've learned is not because of me, it's because of God. He's given me the mind to be able to learn things and be able to teach them and know how to teach them. Once I realized that, I just found myself in just a totally different mentality and being able to thank God not for, like thanks for how the day went, but thanks for giving me the mind to think through these problems at work. That just totally changed my mindset. The other thing I can think of is with soccer, because my kids are getting older and coaching soccer, I stress a lot with coaching teams, two teams, and I'm going to teach these kids wrong. And again, I'm in a mentor role for these kids that may not have a great home life, may not have, and just something, and that's a positive thing that can come for that 1 hour of soccer a week and positive, and I can be positive for them. So if I can pray and thank you not for, me being awesome at coaching, but for giving me the ability to coach them. Once I realized that, it's not because of me, it's not anything I did, it's God gave me these abilities. That has really changed just my mentality of thinking of things. So I find this one, I don't know if it's just because I'm getting closer to 40 now, I find this one a whole lot easier for me now than when I was younger.
I appreciate the thoughts and the comments, and definitely it seems that through situations and as we analyze more, we're definitely able to get more wisdom and see more of the aspects as we look at them, where God has kind of guided us through and has given us some of those talents and that knowledge, and how we're able to just strive to always improve and just be thankful for Him. And it's a wonderful mindset to have. So thank you for those thoughts. Anybody else have any thoughts about why they find it easier to pray in good times?
For me, it's easier when you become humbled. Like, you get broken down to nothing. You find more appreciation in things. So like being humbled, going forward, it's just easier to relate and take advantage of like the small things you never really could take advantage of before for me. So it could be just minuscule, like somebody smiling, like something like that. So
Definitely. That kind of goes along. That goes along with the one thought that I had written down as well, and that gives us the ability to focus on the good and the positive things. And so, yeah, definitely appreciate that. So,
I learned to live with some joy in my heart because of knowing the twins, Alicia and Liz. We had, my other wife and I, we had such good times with them. And one day, this is just the fun part of it, they were talking with one another back here in the foyer, getting ready to leave, getting ready to part company, and they kissed one another. And I said, that's just like kissing yourself in the mirror. They laughed. They thought that was funny. But before that, we went to a wedding in Florida, and their mother and father said, the girls are going to have to stay with you. We don't have enough room in our motel. So they stayed with us, and the last thing she said was, now when you get in bed, you be quiet. closely knit together. They can't hardly go to sleep without getting rid of a whole bunch of thoughts in their mind. We loved every minute of it.
Yeah, I can kind of understand what you're saying because they have a closer relationship between two people than I could ever really know. And there's sometimes when I have to wonder, you know, how it is that they're like that and how they strive to do that. And it makes me think about how, okay, do I have any relationships like that? Should I strive to be that connected to more people? Or it kind of gives me the thought of how can I improve in my relationships with other people? And it gives me something to think about, especially as I've been studying this, like how can I improve and have that kind of relationship with God? How they strive to always communicate and talk, and they treat each other like a soundboard. And just how is it that we can strive to have that kind of relationship with God? All right, I think I'm about to have the bell rung on me, but I might be able to get through a little bit of the Psalmist prayed in bad times. I kind of wanted to, since I'm just about ready to end, I wanted to jump down and ask the other thought question in 16 and say, why do some neglect prayer in bad times? I don't know if anybody had some thoughts about why they think that they neglect prayer in bad times. Zach?
I'll talk again. A lot of the times, bad times are inflicted on us by ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We've done something that has caused certain things to happen that are not good. And to go to those things to God can bring the feeling of shame pretty quickly. And so it's easy to push that away because I don't want to tell God. Yes, of course He knows, but I don't want to talk to Him about all the bad things I just did to make me get in this position. So shame can really push us away from God in times like that.
It almost kind of gives us tunnel vision that we're not able to see. I know before I moved here, I went through probably, I think, the roughest period of my life that I think I'd been in. And I felt like I'd hit rock bottom. And it wasn't till I was there and I was stuck. I couldn't go anywhere. And I realized I can't get out of this on my own. No matter what, like it didn't matter. I had to accept that if I just tried myself, it was just going to lead to failure. There was nowhere else to go, and you have to seek that help. You have to look for that relationship with God. Yep.
Go ahead, finish what you're saying.
And so I realized that in my bad times I neglected my relationship with God. And it wasn't until I couldn't go anywhere that I realized how bad off I was and that I needed to change that. And once I finally did, I was able to look at all the points and see where all He had offered help, where all He had sent somebody or guidance or different things, and how it was just, I just had that tunnel vision in that bad time, and I just missed all of it. So I feel like sometimes we just get, in a bad situation, we have that tunnel vision, we just fail to see. And if you have that prayer life that you should with God, then you know to turn to Him in the bad times before you get to that point. All right.
Before we close,
Yes.
in Galatians, the 5th chapter, and the 1st verse, it says, "It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." Sometimes we don't get away from that yoke of slavery.
You're
We
right.
need to confirm ourselves with our conversation with our Father and His Son.
Indeed we do. So that's a much happier thought to end it on. I appreciate everybody's participation, thoughts, and comments. And thank you for the for the class period that we had this evening.